here. Let's talk about immigration for a second, because this has been such a disappointment over my 6 years in Congress that we can't get a settlement on immigration, right? Immigration is, I mean, it defines this nation. We are virtually all the sons and daughters of immigrants, and it should be something that we celebrate as a nation rather than something that politically divides us. And we have finally gotten to a moment where it looks like we might be able to get a comprehensive immigration reform bill passed in the United States Congress in the short term. For the first time ever, we have Republicans and Democrats, first time in the last 20 years, we have Republicans and Democrats sitting down together to work on immigration reform. These are just some basic stats about what's going on today. You know, 1/3 of foreign-born people living in the United States are here without documentation. We think it's around 11 million people. We're doing more deportations now than we ever have done before, but that's costing us about $206 billion every 5 years just to move people out of this country. And the stats tell us that if we do comprehensive immigration reform right, it'll make a lot of money for this country, because it'll take people that weren't paying taxes, put them onto the tax rolls, and take a lot of these workers out of the shadows. And so here's what this sort of group of Republicans and Democrats are working on right now. They're working on a plan that would first get much tougher on the borders. There's no doubt that our borders are still too porous. I went down a couple of years ago to the El Paso Juarez border, and you go just a couple miles outside of the city, and there's no fencing. There's a pretty easy ability of people to move back and forth. That's unacceptable. And so first and foremost, immigration reform has to be about getting tougher on the borders. Second, we've got to enforce the laws that are on the books. We have looked the other way for 20 years, both with respect to individuals and employers when it's come to illegal immigration. So we've got to start enforcing the laws that are on the books and giving employers the tools to sort of figure out who they're hiring that's legal or those without documentation. And so let's give them the tools to figure that out, and then let's enforce it. And if employers are hiring people that are here without documentation, let's hold them accountable, just like we should be holding the individuals accountable. And then lastly, this is the most controversial part, but there is some consensus developing around it. Let's just admit that we are not going to be able to deport 11 million people, and frankly, it's not even the compassionate thing to do from a nation that has essentially opened its doors through sort of willful non-enforcement of the laws for the last 20 years. And so let's create a pathway to earn citizenship. Let's not give anything away, but let's say to people, you've been in this country for a period of time, if you haven't violated any laws, if you have family here, that you can get in line behind everybody else that's already in line to become citizens of this country and stay. And let's first take care of the kids. The idea that kids that were brought here by their parents who are educated in our school system are being kicked out without ever knowing anything about their home country, that to me is probably the first problem that we should solve. But I think that there is some consensus forming around this, and I think it's important that we get it done, because I think it's not just good for our economy if we get this right, but I think it also is just good for our soul as a nation if we stop letting this issue tear us apart. And then lastly, let's talk a little bit about gun control, because this is clearly a conversation that originates from a horrific incident in Cheshire, in Newtown, Connecticut. It was a horrific incident in Cheshire, Connecticut, not so long ago as well. I wear these two bracelets on my arm. One is for an Army sniper who was killed in Afghanistan, given to me by his widow, and the other is for a young man killed in Newtown, Connecticut. I was there that day. I got there not more than hours after the shooting happened. I've come to know these families, some of them very well, over the past 2 months. There's virtually very few days that go by where I don't spend some time with the parents of the 6- and 7-year-olds who were killed there, and either in person or on the phone. I've come to believe that it's time that this country have a serious, comprehensive conversation about gun violence. I know all of the attention gets put on the steps, the things that are listed here, which is the gun laws of this country. And I want to talk about the gun laws of this country because I think they can be better and stronger. But we have to admit that this is a bigger problem than just tightening the gun laws of this country. We knew that morning who the shooter was before we even got a profile. because we had seen this shooter before. It was a probably young, probably male, probably very deeply emotionally disturbed, probably cut off from society in one way, shape, or form, because we'd seen that profile in Aurora and Tucson and in Littleton over and over and over again. We have a problem in that we have a mental health system that A, is not serving millions of people across this country who need help, but specifically isn't doing a very good job of finding those people who have that rare intersection, and it is rare, between mental health and violence. We need to have a better mental health system that reaches out to those kids and those young adults who are in need, and parents who want to find help for them. We need to have a conversation about school safety. I mean, listen, that school did everything that it should have done. This guy blasted his way through the front door, but we can certainly talk about how we can make schools more inclusive places where both parents and teachers and kids feel safe, but also students don't feel disconnected from the school so that they go grab a gun and come back and do something rash. I think, and this is something that government can't really do much about, but we do have to have a conversation about the culture of violence in this country. I mean, I don't know to what extent that Adam Lanza's obsession with violent video games caused him to pick up an assault rifle and walk into that school, but we do know that that is a sort of recurring theme, is that a lot of these kids have had exposure to really violent media. And I'm not proposing that government comes in and passes a law censoring video game makers or filmmakers, but I think we got to start admitting that this is part of the story that is told over and over again in these shootings. But we do have to talk about the laws that we have right now that don't work, I would argue, for guns in this country. Background checks for all gun purchasers. Something that we've sort of long accepted as a really smart idea. Let's make sure that people who are buying guns aren't criminals, don't have domestic violence restraining orders against them, haven't been adjudicated seriously mentally ill. Problem is, only about 60% of guns sold in this country actually get a background check, because a lot of guns are sold in private sales. I think that we can have a consensus conversation about the fact that anybody buying a gun should probably have to prove first that they're not a criminal. And that background check is instantaneous most of the time, so it's not a real big burden. This kind of military-style assault weapon that was used in this crime, but also in many of these other crimes. Listen, I think we should get rid of them. I think that if we did have a renewed federal assault weapons ban, there would still be literally thousands of weapons that would be available to individuals who want to use them to hunt for sport or shoot for sport or protect themselves. I just think that as this weapon, in particular this design, becomes sort of the weapon of choice for mass murderers, we've got to accept that the reality that we're living in today, and take that off the streets. I think it would ultimately help solve this problem. I particularly care about this issue of high-capacity magazines almost more so than I do the issue of assault weapons, because here I think there's very little justification as to why a private individual needs a 100-round drum, as the guy who walked into the movie theater in Aurora had, or even a 30-round magazine. I think that you can protect yourself or enjoy your sport with 7 or 10 or 15 rounds rather than 30 or 100. And I really do believe that that there would be kids alive today in some of these places if simply the size of the magazine had been smaller. And then, so those are the three pieces that are generally being talked about on the gun side. I mentioned already what we have to do to improve our mental health system, take on this culture of violence, and make our schools safer. And I think that we can develop a pretty comprehensive bill that does all of those things, that yes, does strengthen our gun laws, but also strengthens our mental health system, and also gives new tools to school systems to make them safer, and maybe also puts a little bit of pressure on the entertainment industry to become a little bit more responsible. And again, I think that that's where sort of, the middle of this country is. I know that there are folks on one side who want all the guns gone, and people on the other side who want all the guns legal. Just as I know on immigration, there's people who want everybody who's here without documentation to be able to stay, and people who want everybody who's here without documentation to leave. Just as I know that on the budget conversation, there's some people that think we should solve the whole problem by cutting government and solve the whole problem by increasing taxes. I am in neither of those 6 camps. I am somebody that believes that you can do both, that you can solve the budget problem by a little bit of increased taxes and a little bit of cutting spending, that you can solve the immigration problem by letting some people, but not everyone, that's here without documentation stay. And I'm somebody that believes that you can try to reduce gun violence by making the conversation be not just about gun laws, but when talking about gun laws, respect Second Amendment rights while trying to take a look at some of these weapons and some of these loopholes in our background checks laws that can be better. And that's what I want to hear from you guys about today. I want to hear where you are on these. I want to answer your questions on all these topics, and I want to talk about other things, because these are just 3 of the things that are really, really important that we should be talking about today. And this is just the opening of a dialogue. I just hope that you'll see that I have a door that's wide open, a mind that is largely wide open for your input, and I really, really look forward to today, but more than that, I look forward to the chance to represent Manchester and represent the surrounding area for the next 5.5 years. So thank you very much, everybody. Sean, what's the first